Hello, and welcome to Sacred Mindshift Circle. I'm your host, Dahlia Dever-Donalds, and today our guest is Simon Garfield Bown, a clinical hypnotherapist certified in past life regressions therapy and a member of the International Practitioners of Holistic Medicine. He's the author of the book, Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife, a compelling exploration of consciousness beyond the physical realm. Welcome, Simon. Thank you for coming.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit more about yourself and your interest in deciding to investigate past lives. Tell me a bit about your experiences.
Well, I started reading books out of the public library when I was 10 years old, and I'd read anything that was supernatural. So it could have been UFOs or Bigfoot or ghosts. And as I got older, I became more fascinated with this thing of the afterlife, and does consciousness continue after we die? And I started going to this place in London in the 80s called the College of Psychic Studies. And that was formed by the Society of Psychical Research like 140 years ago. And what it is there's people who can go there as a college and learn how to do mediumship and psychic stuff, channeling, past life regressions. And so I would go every couple of weeks, and you could pay a little bit of money and the students could practice their mediumship on you. So for me, it was like an investigation because I was so fascinated. So I saw mediums and psychics, and I saw a channel and a trance medium, and I was taken through a past life regression because I wanted to try everything. And it was a really impactful session. And I was amazed by how deep I went into it and how much I saw in my mind's eye and how much knowledge I got from it. And so as time went on, I continued reading lots of books, seeing lots of different people and having more past life regressions. And so it got to a point where I thought I wanted to do that and have a change of career, because I was working in IT. And, it's like working with computers is soulless. And I wanted to do something that was soulful. So I got a clinical diploma in clinical hypnotherapy, and then I got certified in past life regression therapy. And this was a few years ago. And I started taking people through past life regression. And so I've been doing that for a few years, and I've done hundreds of sessions. And it's just amazing what comes up and amazing how healing it can be.
So your book, Verified Near-Death Experiences, it has about 30 accounts, more or less, of actual stories of people who have experienced this. Can you tell me a little bit more about it and how you found these stories and the people to come out and give you their account?
Yeah, well, I have the podcast. It's called Our Paranormal Afterlife. And I've done over 350 interviews with all sorts of people, whether they've had near-death experiences or children with past life memories, mediums, and people who talk about deathbed visions and just all sorts of things. And so over time, I've interviewed many people who've had near-death experiences. And the particular part of it that I'm interested in is this thing of where there's verification there. So it might be that somebody's in the operating theatre and they die on the table. And so you've got these boxes that measure things like heart rate and brain, and you can see the heart has stopped, brain has flatlined. But when they're resuscitated, they say, but I watched you resuscitate me. I was on the ceiling and I was looking down and I saw you do this and you did that. And the medical staff would say, but your brain was flatlined while we did that. You were dead. There's no way you could know that. So that there's verification that they can accurately describe what happened while their body was dead, which is just impossible. I interviewed a guy called Eben Alexander, who was the professor of neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School. And he told me that within about 20 seconds of your heart stopping, your brain will flatline. And then it's impossible to make and retain complex memories. But that's exactly what's happening. So most of the people in the book have been guests on my podcast, and I've talked to them about these events. And on the podcast, and then I did further Zoom calls with them. And when I'd finished the book, I sent them the chapter they're featured in for them to check it for accuracy. So these aren't just stories I've picked up off Google or something. I've talked to these people. They've verified what I have put in the book is accurate. And there's so many of them where it's not just being in the operating theatre and seeing something. They might see something in another room in the hospital, or they might see something that's miles away from where their body is. That's all verified. And it's a thing that there's some kind of skeptical argument that says, well, if it was in the operating theatre, they may have had some form of consciousness. They heard noises, they hallucinated stuff, and they kind of put it all together. But if they can accurately describe what happened in the waiting room or what happened in an apartment 7 kilometers away, it's very hard to say that wasn't a spiritual experience, that their consciousness didn't leave their body. And these are all sorts of cases I have in my book. And also what it is each chapter is a different person. I describe their entire near-death experience, what happened to them to cause them to get into that situation. And as well as the verification, I describe all of the spiritual side of it, of when they meet their deceased loved ones, and they meet other spiritual beings there, and they have the life review, and all these different things show up. And occasionally, like there was a girl who said that she sat with Jesus and the Heavenly Father, and she was 7 years old, and she said that. And then there was another woman who was a very strong Catholic, and in her near-death experience, she found herself on this hill that was quite awful. It was just dirt and rocks. And ahead of her, there was a man dressed in just like this linen, dirty old smock with these sandals like you'd expect to see in the Roman times. And he had long hair and a beard. And she looked at him and thought, that can't be Jesus. Jesus doesn't look like that. But she just followed him to the top of this hill. And on the other side, this incredible landscape with all this greenery and these buildings and all these people. So, yeah, so it's not just an analysis that you could be more kind of scientific or academic, where it's looking for verifications and studying them. There's a lot in the book, a lot more than that, that's quite spiritual.
So I don't know if you've researched my page, but I'm very into the concept of the matrix. And one of the ideas, especially when it comes to guides and the people whom we see at the end of our journey, sometimes they say that when we're seeing these individuals, they could possibly be archons pretending to be relatives, or they could be actual guides or soul guides. What can you dive a little bit more into that? Did you ever hear of situations where the people who had these experiences didn't trust the guides, or that they felt like the guides could have been something other than what they were?
No, never came across that. This is something where when you're in that space, just about every single person who has this experience say that you have a absolute connection to all the other souls, all the other spirits that you meet, and you communicate with telepathically, and it's impossible to lie with telepathy because you're communicating a kind of an understanding. You're not using words and sentences, and you can communicate in an instant this whole understanding you might have. And that because it's absolute and it's 100% connection, nothing can be hidden. Now, spirit guides, when you meet them in a near-death experience, or anybody, it seems they can present themselves in any way they want, kind of visually. Like people say they meet their grandmother in this near-death experience, and she looks like she's 25 years old or 30. And it's because that's how she likes to present herself. She's no longer an old person. She's a soul now. She doesn't have a physical body. But that idea of fooling, it just doesn't come up. I've done taken people through hundreds of past life regressions, and I've read so many books and talked to so many people. So I don't find any evidence for that at all. And it's that thing that I just can't see any evidence for it. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. So sorry, I have to go on to the next thing.
It's all right. Yeah, no, just curious because, it's like you hear one thing, you hear another, and I'd really like to hear from the people that actually experience this. In fact, I was wondering, as far as when they come back, from this state, is there any kind of message? They say that they are in a happy feeling most of the time, and that it feels like they're connected. Do they want to come back? Or do they have this kind of message afterwards, like for the world, or something that shifts in their mindset that they start to express and they want to live differently? Anything of that nature?
Yeah, it's massive. There's a thing where people come back completely changed, and they are changed for the rest of their lives. If it was a hallucination, hallucinations don't change you like that. There's a statistic that 70% of people who have a near-death experience get divorced. And it's a lot of it's because they are changed so much, their partner doesn't know who they are anymore. And they're changed in such ways that they're not interested in material things anymore. They experience this love in their near-death experience, which it's so powerful. It's almost like love is the wrong word for it. What we feel on earth is just pale compared to what you feel over there. And an example of somebody who's changed, he was an art professor, and he was about 30 years old, and he took his students from America to Europe so they could visit these amazing galleries and see all these paintings. But when they were in Paris, he became very ill and he went into hospital, and it turned out that his stomach had ruptured and his stomach acids were leaking into his abdomen, and it would have killed him if they hadn't operated. But he said that he was lying in bed feeling so bad, and then in an instant later he was standing next to his bed. He felt fantastic. And this guy was what he called himself an aggressive atheist, and his wife was there by the bed, and he was trying to talk to her and she wouldn't answer him. And there was a body in the bed, but he didn't kind of recognize that was himself, his own body, because he was such an atheist. That would be absurd if it was his body. But then he heard some voices in the hallway calling to him. His name was Howard Storm. And the voice was saying, "Come on, Howard, it's time to go, it's time to go." And he was thinking, it's time for my operation. So he went out into the hall, and there's some people there, and he started walking down this hallway. And as they were walking along, it was getting darker and darker. And he was thinking, I don't remember this hallway being this long. This hospital's not this big. And he stopped and he said, I'm going to go back. I'm not going to go with you. And then they started getting aggressive and swearing at him and pushing him. And he took him way down this hall into complete darkness where they attacked him. And so he had this very distressing kind of part of this near-death experience. And I don't know who those people were. They may have been lost souls, or because they talk about when you die initially, you have a certain frequency, your mind state, your attitudes, and you go to the place that fits with your frequency. And so there may be people who feel that bad. That's where they go initially, and they move on from there eventually. And that's a whole other story. But he was beaten badly, and he was lying on the floor, and he heard this voice in his mind say, "Pray." And he thought, "Pray?" And he heard the voice again say, "Pray." But he's an atheist. He doesn't know how to pray. And he said he started quoting Shakespeare. He couldn't think of any prayers. And he quoted a TV advert. But then he remembered the Lord's Prayer, and he started saying it. And all the people around him got really angry, were shouting at him to shut up. But at the same time, he noticed they were all backing off. So he kept saying this prayer over and over. And this pin spot of light appeared up in the sky above him. And it came down, and there were these two arms that lifted him up out of that space into the light. And when he got into the light, he said it was Jesus that had picked him up out of that space. And he said he felt terrible. He thought, if this is Jesus, this is real, I'm in big trouble because I've been an atheist. But he said Jesus was so loving and talked to him. And I said to him, how did you know it was Jesus? And he just said, "Oh boy, you know if you meet him." So to cut a long story short, after he was revived and he lived on, he finished his job as a professor of art and became a pastor. He went to seminary, and that's what he's done since then. And he's in his 60s now. So it's over 30 years since his experience. And he just says he loves what he does now. And so he even got a bit tearful when he was on my podcast and I was talking to him about it. So that's how much near-death experiences can change people, from being an aggressive atheist and then 12 hours later being completely Christian and wanting to sign up for seminary. So many people have changed. And I think there's a thing where the divorce might happen is because somebody will come back from a near-death experience and they were very career orientated. They wanted the big house and the great car and the great holidays and the money. And they come back and they're like, no, I don't want that anymore. And they become very aware of climate and helping people and being loving. And if they come back like that, and their partner might be saying, but hang on a second, I like the money. I like the big house. I don't want to give up on all this stuff. So you could see how maybe that would cause a divorce. So yeah, the near-death experience is very powerful for a lot of people.
That's interesting, and it's fascinating to hear something like that. So there was a part where you were mentioning as the people were in this I guess you could say this phenomenon, and they were seeing themselves sometimes in the same room, and sometimes they were seeing themselves far away. Do you understand why that was happening, that some of the people could actually just be within the same proximity of their body, but yet others were so far away?
Yeah, they just seem to be able to travel. There's a guy in my book, one of the chapters is on this Hungarian man. His name was Tibor Putnoki, and he had very, very high blood pressure. So he was in hospital for that. He had a heart attack. And it was the same sort of thing as the guy earlier. He just found himself standing in the ward with these nurses rushing past him and a doctor. And he looked round and they were around his bed. He couldn't see the body. And he thought, I wonder what's going on there. That must be a real VIP patient to get all that attention. And there was a room to the side of the ward where the nurses had loads of things and they do all this preparation. But there was a mirror window, so they could see in the ward, but you couldn't see in that room. And he thought to himself, I wonder what's going on in there. And then in an instant, he's in that room. It's like teleportation. And he could see what was happening in that room. And I'll cut a long story short again. And one of the nurses was on the phone with her husband, and he was listening to the conversation, and he thought about the husband. And then instantly he's with the husband in their apartment, miles away from the hospital. So it just seems that you think of being somewhere and you're there. That's how they travel. That's how they would move away from their body. But when he came back, the doctor came to him and said, you were dead for 9 minutes. What happened? And he described what happened in that room next to the ward. He talked about the phone call. He described the apartment. And he even said when he was in the apartment, he saw the man's socks. And they had all these little pictures of animals on them. And he thought to himself, what kind of a man wears socks like this? But when the doctor went to the apartment and saw that it was exactly as he described it, when he came back to the hospital, he was holding those socks in his hand, the socks that he'd seen. So there's all sorts of verification events in that one. But that seems to be how people move. That's how they all talk about it. One lady described it to me as the blink environment, which you just blink and then you're somewhere else. Somebody else called it the fog stage. There's a little bit of fog for them and then they were somewhere else.
So as part of my experience, I've had not a near-death experience, but I've had outer-body experience. And it started when I used to meditate a lot. And one thing I can say, I recalled I was somehow, I could tell I was floating above my body. And I looked out through the doorway of the bedroom and I didn't really know what to do, but I noticed the more I focused on the doorway, it was as if all of a sudden I started going towards the door. So it's pretty fascinating. In that time when this was happening, obviously I was a bit afraid I wasn't going to continue through the door. I don't remember how I got out of that stage, because I've been someone who's always had sleep paralysis, and that usually can trigger out-of-body experiences. Have you ever had anything similar to what some of these accounts speak about in your life?
I've had all sorts of paranormal experiences. I had like psychic flashes where I've seen little things in the future. One of them was I was going to visit my friend in New Zealand. I'd never been to New Zealand before, and 2 weeks before I went, I had this vision of these things happening while I was there. And then 2 weeks later, those things happened exactly as I'd seen them in the vision. I've had two really close-up UFO sightings, and I've been taken through these past life regressions where amazing things have happened. And then I see little things like I'll see a piece of paper in my mind with all this color on it, and I won't know what it is. And then I'll go to the get my car back from the garage, and that's the bill, and they've got all these bits, different colored bits for different things on it. And there's dreams as well that have been quite powerful. I had a very vivid dream where my mother-in-law, and she had just died a few months before, came to visit me in the dream. And I still remember that dream right now, and it's so vivid in my mind. And it felt so weird compared to anything else I've experienced. I feel like she really was visiting me in that dream. So there's all sorts of little things that have come up.
And because of these experiences and all of the accounts that you've investigated, how do you look at consciousness and spirituality? Has it affected also your beliefs before you? Well, I guess if you've always had these experiences, it's nothing new for you. But has it changed in any way your spirituality after learning about all of these accounts?
I'd say I've become more spiritual over time. I was not brought up in any religion, and the neighborhood I lived in, nobody was religious. It's just what it was like in that part of London at that time. So none of my friends went to church. Religion just wasn't a thing that was around for any of us, and that's what it's been like my whole life. And so I was always interested in the supernatural. I found that fascinating. But as more I study near-death experiences and all these other things, I'd say I've become more spiritual. And for me, I've got no doubts at all that there is an afterlife. And I feel like what may be happening is our brains, our physical brains, are like receivers. And if you say your brain is, say, like a radio, and it's receiving stuff, when a radio breaks, it doesn't mean that the radio station stops transmitting. So that's how I kind of see it, as your brain is a receiver. And when your brain dies, it doesn't mean, say, your consciousness is no longer there. And from what we can tell from near-death experiences is when your consciousness is released from your physical brain, you have far better sight, hearing, you can think much faster. It's like your brain is really slowing down what your consciousness is.
Okay. And also, as far as the people who have had these near-death experiences, have they ever somehow tapped into any kind of past lives in any way?
Yeah, kind of. Many of them say that there's something happened during their near-death experience, maybe with their spirit guides or something else, where they see that reincarnation is a thing. There's one woman in my book who was in this amazing countryside, and there were all these people to her left in the distance, and they were wearing clothes from all different eras of mankind, and some that looked like they're from the future. There are even beings there that weren't human. And she wondered what all these were doing here, but then she realized these were all her past and future lives, and she could sense a spark of her soul in all of them. So that's one there. But there's other people, like they're kind of shown a timeline of their past lives and get an idea of why they're here this time, what they're working on. So it does show up, yeah.
So would this be similar to a life review, what people consider a life review?
No, that's quite different. The life review can be really impactful and emotional. It's where you review your life, obviously, but you relive every second of your life. And the near-death experiences say, even though you're saying, and maybe I saw 50 years in that time, it's over in an instant. and you see how you affect people. And it's about relationships and your emotions and how you affect other people's emotions. And so if you're mean to someone in the life review, you're in their position. So you feel how they felt when you were mean to them. And if it's 50 years worth of that in an instant, that can really hit you hard. But at the same time, if you're nice to someone, you feel that as well. And some of these people say they have a spiritual being with them or a spirit guide, and that nobody's judging you when you're going through all these things and seeing perhaps the times you've been really awful. It's you are judging yourself. There's no God judging you or anything. And it's like the spirit guides will be backing you up and they're helping you through it. But what people notice is when you're nice to people, the spirit guides are really pleased. And it could be the slightest little thing, with some little thing you've done. And for the spirit guide, this is huge. Just this little thing you've done that's nice to someone. And so the life review is seen in all different ways. Some people say they see it on a screen, like a TV. There's somebody in my book said it's like they were sitting at a table in an office, and it was all in a hologram in front of them on the table. Somebody else said that it was like looking inside a huge box and they saw all these things happening. Somebody else said they were standing in this sphere and it was all around them, all these different incidents going on. But they could watch every single one of them all at the same time and really get into each one and understand it. But it wasn't at all overwhelming. And it was like be impossible for us to do it. We'd have to watch them one at a time. So yeah, it's the life review is very different to that.
Do you think today that science is proving more and more that the soul exists and the afterlife exists?
Well, the last few days I've recorded a couple of episodes of my podcast, and there's two guys who've been talking about quantum physics. And this guy was quoting these scientists. It could have been Einstein, Niels Bohr, maybe in the 1940s. And they're saying things that when you look at quantum physics, consciousness is the base of everything, the base of reality, and not matter. And matter springs out of consciousness. And he has these quotes from these scientists kind of saying things that it looks like consciousness is all around us. It's in everything. And it goes on forever. And it almost sounds like a description of God that is in everything and is all around us. So that there does seem to be something in quantum physics that might be pointing to our consciousness being what you might call eternal or infinite. Because they say that when you get down to the basis of existence, matter is actually energy. So what if we touch a table or something, actually that table is just made of energy and it doesn't physically exist. It's crazy, but it's this thing where we've had Newtonian physics for so long, and it's really great at describing what you might call the macro world or the macro universe. But when we really get down to the tiny, tiny things of existence, Newtonian physics breaks down, and that's where quantum physics comes in.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for coming on and discussing this topic with me. And if anyone is interested, I will be linking his podcast and also the link to his book, Verified Near-Death Experiences, in the podcast below. And be sure to subscribe to sacredmindshift.com so you never miss an event or another exciting episode. Thank you so much, Simon.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed it.